Shalom. Lesson 5, Talmud Eser Sephirot. Part 1, Chapter 2. Tzimtzum and Kav. Chapter 2. A kav extended from Ein Sof into the Halal. Shalom. This will hopefully be a new series of videos discussing the book by the Baal HaSulam, Talmud Eser Sephirot. None of the narrators or people that express their understanding of a text in these videos proclaim to be rabbis or even experts on the text of the Talmud Eser Sephirot. We are a group of students that gather together and seek a better understanding of a text. We are in a sense a Ravruta. These videos are not endorsed, nor do they proclaim to be associated with the Kabbalist organization of Bnei Barur under Rav Michael Letman, or any other Kabbalist group or organizations. We are of the belief that each individual has the knowledge of the world within, that all the Olamot and Sephirot are represented within each man, and in such, it is up to each individual to seek the understanding within oneself. We do not proclaim that our discussions here reveal the only understanding possible of a text. We ask from anyone listening to ask himself or herself what the text means to him or her, and how do they connect to it. Each will have a different understanding dependent upon where one found himself or herself on the path. We seek only to share our studies with others, seeking closeness to their Creator and the people about them. May He guide you in your studies and journeys on the path, and may God be with you. Peace and love. Tzimtzum and Kav, Chapter 2, Talmud Eser Sephirot.
Chapter 2 explains how the Or Ein Sof extended a kav to the Olamot that were emanated and created in the place of the Halal that was restricted, containing 5 issues. 1. A kav extended from Ein Sof into the Halal. 2. The Rosh of the kav touches Ein Sof, not its Siyam. 3. Or Ein Sof expands to the Olamot through the kav. 4. All the Olamot are in the place of that Halal that has been restricted. And 5. Prior to the Tzimtzum, there was He is one and His name one, and the mind cannot attain Him. So a kav extended from Ein Sof into the Halal. Item 1. After the above Tzimtzum, there remained a place of Halal and vacant empty avir in the middle of that Or Ein Sof. Then there was a place for the Ne'etzalim and the Nivarim and the Yetzufim and the Nahasim. Then, yes.
Sorry to stop you. So maybe because we can why that difference of terminology. Nivra is like from the lesson Boré. To create. No, things are falling down here. To create from Nivraim, from create, right? Yetzuvim is from Yetzer to Leyatzer. It's create, but in really it's to form. They use the term same terminology in création, creator and creation, but really it's a formation. And Naasim is from Laasot, that is done, which is that's why it is mostly Naasim should be it is made. But there is a difference between forming something and making it. Forming is to put it together, when making it is to expand it to in English, I don't like English at all, but there is a difference into that form. So just so we understand the terminology here. It's really according to other olamot. Come on, it's like we have, right? Yetzira, Beria, Yetzira, V'Asiya. Okay, Freiter.
Then one Kav Yashar extended from Or Ein Sof, from his Or Agol, from above downward, and hung down into that halal. So there's actually a bit going on. Like you were talking about with the thinking of this in terms of Bia. So Bria, creating, forming, and then, like you said, the distinction of making, or the Malhut, the actual manifesting. So we just have this again above-down relationship.
When we were we learned before into the chapter 1 that when the Tzimtzum was created, but before the Tzimtzum there is no place to do nothing. Everything is full. So the Tzimtzum creates that vacuum, that halal. The Tzimtzum, it concentrates itself in the center of a circle, right? And again, the terminology, I think we know what we're talking about. So I don't want to get back again into about the circle and everything. So it concentrated itself in the middle of the circle, creating a halal, an empty space around it, which permit now into that space there will be a possibility for Netzalim and all the other extension of creation to be able to start the process of correction. And here it's really giving me a hint of all the various olamot that we take, that we saw into a different picture when we're looking at the text, but it is one circle within the other, till the center. So I was saying that the contraction permitted that empty space around the center, the middle. So into that place, there will be a possibility now to create, to make something. The correction is possible now to be done towards into the light. The curve that is descending, all the words are in particularity to the same Yud Vav Ke. And the Vav is the last before it descends to the last A. It's between the Yud A and Vav A. The Vav is between the A that is into the process of creation, the emanation of a light, which is a hook that descends to the last A, which is the Malhut, which is the center of the middle of a circle. And that's what they're telling me here. Do you want to expand, Raz?
No, sounds perfect.
Okay. Anyone has any question about that part so far? If not, Frater will be able to continue reading.
Okay. So, item 1. Do not be misled into the thought that the Tzimtzum of the Or from the middle point caused any changes in Ein Sof. There is no change in absence in spirituality, and all the more so in such a sublime place. The above Tzimtzum became a new essence, in addition to Ein Sof. Thus Ein Sof remained in its entire simple unity as before the Tzimtzum, as he is one and his name one. The Tzimtzum on the middle point is perceived as a new Olam that came out, from which the Or departed and left an empty halal, as we've explained above. It is in the place of that halal that all the Olamat were emanated. Item 2. We should not perceive this act in its superficial meaning as a human act, where one does one thing and then another, while no longer performing the first act. There is no greater materialization than that, because he is not subject to change in episodes. It is written, I, the Lord, do not change. We are not discussing his Atzmut, but only the or that expands from him. However, because there is no change and incident in motion in his atzmut, and he is in complete and utter rest, so must be the or that expands from him, as long as it does not reach the ne'etzal, meaning as long as it did not clothe the kalim.
This is the part that we were discussing last time, right? When I took the example of the first light and lighting up into a wall, but so long as it is connected to the, and this again, my terminology here does not give right to what it's saying, but so long as it is connected to the Ein Sof, but it is the light is yet not really in a sinut surah. There is no differentiation of form into the light and the Ein Sof till it is perceived, till it is received by the Kli. When the Kli receives it, and that's what I was trying to emphasize last time, but it is the Kli that creates, in a sense, that differentiation. There is no difference into the light. The light is a constant. It's always at rest, in a sense. But it's not, and when the Kli receiving it and create those restrictions, as we were looking before, when it was speaking about Tzimtzum, of restriction within the Kli that was to be able to receive the light, so that it diminishes its desire to will to receive, so it can develop a will to bestow. And so that's where the difference is here, as we were emphasizing before. So till the light hasn't reached the Kli, in a sense, there is no difference between the light and the Ein Sof.
Perfect. So we're dealing only with the simple light and all the different perceptions that the vessel would have of that light.
Well, you can, on a real basic idea, if you sit down, I use a child and a father because it's just the easy way to look at it. In order for me to explain the idea of the supernal wisdom of the Garden of Eden, when I sit down with a child, I tell the child a story about a man and a woman who are tempted by a serpent, and I extend this little story to the child, and the child perceives it and understands it in its own way, but it doesn't in any way modify the supernal concept of it, the depth of it, and the depth of my understanding of it. It's just the manner in which the child receives it. And I restricted it. I restricted the enormous wisdom of what it really means down to a very simple way, so the child can somehow digest it in its own way. From the child's vantage point, it can say that, well, my father doesn't really, it only has this little idea of it. And even though it's bigger, and it could start to decide how much wisdom I actually have and what my essence is and how much wisdom is in the light that I'm providing to the child. None of it really changes from my perspective. I still understand it on a big level. I'm just restricting the way in which I'm channeling it to the child or the vessel. So as the vessel grows and we expand on the concept of the Garden of Eden, it becomes more, there's more depth there. So I start to expose myself more and more and reduce the restriction I put around the wisdom. And the child can learn slowly. It can slowly graduate through these stories in one little baby step at a time, rather than me just dumping the wisdom, the whole wisdom of Kabbalah on the child, in a small state, which it would never be able to grasp, and it would be entirely cruel of me. So I have to restrict this wisdom to a portion that I know the child can take in one little step, and by doing that, I help the child grow in its own process. And that's sort of the base way to look at how the restriction works from the creator to the vessel.
Only then does it come to exit his atzmut and become a ne'etzal that is renewed and receives from him. We've already explained that this renewal revolves primarily on the kli of the ne'etzal, meaning the will to receive in the ne'etzal. Although this ratzon is spiritual, it is nonetheless a hidush tzura and an incident, because it is not necessitated in his atzmut.
That's terminology here. Ridush is a new tzura, a new form. Ridush from radash, from new meradeh. So there is something very interesting here. And so since no one is asking the questions, I'm going to have a question. Sometimes we're speaking about sinui tzura, which is a change of form. And here we're speaking about ridush tzura, which means an accident, but it is not necessitated in his atzmut. So what is the difference between here, what we're speaking here as a reduce, and something that we're going to speak, and we're speaking about the Shinui.
Well, first off, the way you would describe the word Hiddush, would you say it's like an arising, or how would you describe the word, or define what it's trying to be?
Something new that was not, which means really it's something that it is not that what they're telling me. It is not into its azimuth, which is very, here we again, the terminology is going to make it very complicated here. But what I'm saying, it sounds like I'm saying that there is something, an incident, that because in spirituality we know such a thing as a will to receive, in a sense. For into the Aurelian there is, we were speaking last time, the potentiality exists there within the answer, within the Aurelian, not within the Ensof, like we were speaking. The Ensof is E, and within his name there exists that potentiality of will to receive. So here it's something very totally new. But it is very different than, it is not a sinutsura, a change of form from a will to receive, from a will to bestow to a will to receive. It's a different incident in something from nothing. Raz, you wanted to add something?
I was thinking that there's a longing in the restriction. It creates within itself a longing, and this longing is in the vessel, but it doesn't necessarily exist. It's not really there. There's no longing in spirituality this way from the Creator, from the infinite light. But because the restriction created some type of longing, some type of desire, that longing is something that is seemingly created, but it doesn't exist necessarily in truth. And although I think the way that this is transcribed is a little complicated, but I think you can possibly look at it as some type of need that didn't exist prior in any way, that the vessel now feels or senses or perceives, but doesn't necessarily truly, isn't really real. It doesn't really exist in some kind of spiritual reality. It's just in the perception of the vessel itself. And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, yeah, no, beautiful. That's exactly, yeah, that's even much better than what I was explaining. It's really bad, but yearning, because that's what they're trying to tell me. Yeah, you got it right on the point. Thanks.
Yeah, you just the yearning, yeah, is a good word. So anyway, Fred, if you want to go on, or if there's any questions.
Okay.
Hello? Hello?
Hi.
Hi, yes, Razu, I have a question. My question is the fact of the yearning you're stating. Is I don't really understand that part when you're talking about the yearning, the vessel. Is it because it hasn't seen the enlightenment yet, or is it because there's obstructions in its view that it's still holding on to desires or attachments?
It's because from the vessels, there's two different perspectives. From the Creator's perspective, obviously it's perfect infiniteness. From the vessel's perspective, because of the restriction, it doesn't quite perceive the same way. Now, in truth, the vessel sits in perfection. But because of what's a good way to say this? Because it longs for its reconnection. You see, the vessel comes from a place of being completely connected to the light. It was one and the same. As it's being born, it's slowly separating itself because of its different attributes. The Creator created within the vessel the desire to receive it. It basically the Creator does not have this desire to receive. It just gave it to the vessel, strictly for the benefit of the vessel. But as the vessel starts to build this attribute of want, which doesn't exist in the Creator, that very attribute separates it from the Creator because they're different attributes. They become different parts. So as this separation happens, there's like a rubber band. As the vessel starts to pull away, it creates this new kind of flavor that is a longing within the vessel. The vessel now longs to be back into the Creator, but because of this longing, it separates it uh, and keeps it away from it. And that's all part of the nature of this generating principle by the creator. It's trying to have that happen, and it knows that will happen, and it creates this illusion that the vessel needs to somehow re-embed itself into the creator, although it's always within the creator in actuality. It just doesn't perceive that yet. And through its learning and its changing and its adopting and its correcting, it slowly breaks apart those concentric circles and realizes that it's always been inside of the creator. So it's sort of this attribute that for the time being, time is not a good word, but for the time being, it perceives this, it longs, and it's part of its evolution. But in reality, it will come to the point and realize that it's always been completely and utterly saturated by infinite light. It's just part of development. If you want to say on a very simple level, we could see it like, again, with a child. The infant is in the arms of the child, of the father, but when the father puts the infant down, the child goes crazy because in its perception it feels like the father's abandoned it. But truly the father's standing over. There's no abandonment here. There's never an abandonment. But from the child's perspective, absolute and utter abandonment. That's how it feels. It screams and it just wants its father back. But this isn't true in a reality of what's really going on. If the child grows up and looks at itself in the cradle, it says, "Oh, I was worried about nothing." This is sort of that idea of how this new perception from the vessel's view only creates a longing, and that longing helps build the necessary ingredients for its reemergence with the creator, or just the acceptance that it was already there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, actually makes perfect sense. Thank you very much. Like Frederick Exper said, emanation, creation, formation, and manifestation, and like something that we're doing too. So that's why in yoga you have to calm down the mind, as they say. It makes a lot of sense how you said it.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. I love that. Yeah, thanks.
Beautiful. Did anyone else have a question? Because I think that that was quite a wonderful explanation, Raz, and it was a good question. Thanks.
Yeah, good question.
Thank you very much.
So, however, the ore that clothes it is not renewed, for it extends from his atzmut, is existence from existence. The actuation of the Or Elyon is according to the measure of the Kli, meaning the Kli is affected and receives from the Or Elyon as a Hidush, which is necessarily an incident. You should know that all the innovations and the concatenation of degrees regard only impact on the Kli and its reception from the Or Elyon, for only that is subject to change and multiplication. However, the Or itself is always an incomplete rest, as it expands from his atzmut. Understand that well and remember every single word of it for the rest of the study in this wisdom.
Okay, so just real quickly, just to touch on this again. When somebody comes to you and says, God's not with me, God has abandoned me, I don't feel God, I don't sense God, the person they're talking to could easily tell them that that's impossible. God is everywhere. How can you feel this way? From the sensation of the person, there's an absolute feeling of abandonment or a non-existent existence of God. In other words, God isn't penetrating me. I feel some sensation of longing. There's something bothering me and I don't sense God, although I know that God has to be everywhere and penetrates all of us. How come I don't perceive this? This is the real problem with the Kli. And this is that illusory idea that God is concealed somehow or gone. And this is how we graduate out of that personal problem from the vessel's point of view into revealing that total face-to-face connection with the Creator's light. And this is, just to touch on it again, it's just the view of the vessel only, and it's not reality at all. So our work is done completely within ourselves. There's nothing I have to do that affects the Creator, affects the Creator's light, affects reality. Reality is perfect. Everything is perfect. It's only from my perspective that this illusion happens. So I just want to add that. Thanks.
So according to the above, you can thoroughly understand that the Or Elyon does not stop shining for the creatures even for a moment. It is not subject to change and innovations, but is in complete rest. The whole issue of the Tzimtzum and the aforementioned departure of the Or regard only the influence on the Kli and its reception, meaning the middle point. In other words, although the Or Elyon does not stop shining, the Kli did not receive any of his Herara because it diminished itself. It diminished its will to receive so as not to receive in its Behina Dalet, meaning the middle point, but only in its three preceding Behinot, whose will to receive is frailer, and where the will to bestow dominates. Thus, the Or Elyon was not affected by the Tzimtzum and did not change its way. Just as it illuminated in the Ein Sof, so it illuminated during the Tzimtzum and after the Tzimtzum, and all the Olamat, even in Olam Asiya. It did not stop shining for a minute, but it is the Kalim that make all those changes, for they only receive according to their measure, being the measure of their will to receive.
And just so you understand, we're not talking yet about we haven't yet gotten to the breaking of in the world of Nicodim, in the world of Absolute Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya, which happened later. We're still talking about this Kli, the development of a Kli. And sometimes when we go through tests, people are trying to associate, where am I here? Am I this me personally? Is this, we haven't gotten to us yet here. It was just talking about the structure of creation and the fundamental principles of how things came about. There's a place to where we get to our world. We're not there yet. So this is just in the development. So when we talk about this restriction, the sensations, the feeling, the Tzimtzum Aleph, and all of these places where Malhut restricted, this is all happening prior to the creation of the worlds below. And so I just want to make that clear, because it's tough to try to associate yourself to this yet. It'll come.
So now you can understand what the Rav meant in the words. One Kav Yashar extended from Or Ein Sof. Means that the place of the Halal itself, meaning the Kli that had been emptied of Or Ein Sof itself, caused the Hamshahah of the Kav from Ein Sof, by reason of the diminution that was renewed in its will to receive. The measure of its current reception, after the Tzimtzum of its Behina Dalet, is called Kav, and meaning relating to its previous reception in Behina Dalet that filled the entire place. However, now that she does not have that great will to receive, but only the previous three Behinot of the Ratzon, whose will to receive is frail, it is regarded as that Kli not receiving more of the Ein Sof, but only one Kav of Or.
Again, we'll eventually get to the conclusion of the creation of the structure of reality, but because the line of light restricted itself, the creator restricted the light, or you can say that the vessel did to a certain extent, but this is all philosophy. So the restriction of light caused the lessening of desire within the vessel as well. There is because there was a lessening of a restriction of light, it means that the vessel also was able to balance itself to a certain degree by making some kind of restriction, some kind of restriction on itself. So it goes both ways. It's not that you can't say that, well, if there's a restriction on the light, doesn't the vessel absolutely go into utter chaos because it wanted at level 100 and then the light restricted itself further and now the desire is even greater. To a certain extent, this halal keeps the vessel in a certain checkpoint, and it keeps it mitigated between it and itself. The reason the vessel likes this position is because it felt that longing and wanted to stop that longing to a certain degree. So this is why it made changes, and it'll become more apparent as we go forward here.
It's like comparing it, if we compare it to a vacuum, right? So that's what it is. There was a vacuum, there's a rala, an empty space, and now it's sucking. It has not of a light of Aurelian within it, it's no more, or Ensof in it. So now it's sucking it, and the Mshara, it's Mosher, it is pulling from the line, the light. So it's pulling the light now, so it needed And according to how strong of a vacuum cleaner you have, more you will get or less you will get. So the desire is in the power of that vacuum cleaner.
I always ramble. It's not, I think enough of me. Frater, keep going. We'll get deeper into this.
Yeah, we'll eventually land somewhere. The entire place of the Kli remains empty and vacant from ore because that minute ore minute ore that she receives now is not enough to fulfill the entire place of the Kli. That happened because of the wanting of Behina Dalet that diminished it. We see that the Or Elion was not at all stopped by the Tzimtzum, did not change so as to extend the Or as one Kav. Instead, this whole great change happened because of the vessels of reception that were diminished and became unable to receive from Or Ein Sof more than a very small measure, called Kav, according to the measure of her desire. That is because she does not want more than that measure.
So we could just see this as like if there's so much longing and so much pressure on the vessel that the vessel has to stop, has to utterly cut off this relationship to a certain degree only because of this pressure. And this is basically the vessel conceding and now trying to create some uniformity or some evenness between it and this desire, this longing. And the only thing it can do is stop. It has no other choice now at this point. And we'll see how the consequences of all of this happen as they roll out.
Item 3. We have already explained the meaning of the Agol, image. He tells us that even after the Tzimtzum, the Or Elion remain in the form of an Igul, meaning without discrimination of degrees. Its four Behina are of equal virtue there. And the reason is that the Or Elion is not subject to change and incidence. These above occurrences of innovations are only with respect to the Kalim. Item 4. Do not forget that we are not discussing corporeal terms whatsoever. Instead, the more Zach is called higher, the more Av is called lower. Anything that can be perceived as hitpashtut of Or from Ma'atzil and its permeation in the Ne'etzal is regarded primarily as a renewal of the Shinui Tzura that exists in the Ne'etzal. In other words, it refers to the will to receive that does not exist in the Ma'atzil and was renewed in him.
Let me stop you like here. Okay, I think those terminology we see before. The Zar is a purity, and it should be Ave, not Av. I don't know why they missed the letter there. Which is a thickness, that there is a thickness within it. And so more there is a thickness, the aviyut, I was speaking about the aviyut is caused because of the side of a kli that are trying to hold onto the light. And so it's becoming more impure and inserts lower. If anyone else has anything else to add or any question to ask, if not, Frater, you'll be able to continue.
Because of that, the Ne'etzal is considered to be far, Ave, low, and inferior to the Ma'atzil. It is the Shinui Tzura from the Ma'atzil that does all that and separates him from being a Ma'atzil to being a Ne'etzal. You should also know that this Shinui Tzura, namely the will to receive, does not appear at once, but is conceived slowly over four Behina. Its form is complete only in Behina Dalet.
So it's saying that everything that happens, everything that's created in the vessel happens because of the vessel's difference between the creator. So this desire, as this desire is going through these stages or attributes, the four Behinat, it's going through these stages, it's becoming aware and starting to discern until it reaches its final state called Behina Dalet. And that final state is where it is completed. It's completely, in its estimation, completely different to a certain degree and recognizes the difference between it and the creator. This is where the vessel says, wow, I have to receive from you in order to exist, and this arrangement we have is causing me discomfort. I don't like this. I have to adjust something. I have to do something. And that only becomes aware in that final state. Prior to that, it's just going through its creation process, its development process. So the four Behinat are the phases that it's slowly emanating into this final state of its apparent total separation from the creator. And that's it.
All right, we'll land up somewhere. It therefore turns out that the entire form of its will to receive is very frail, meaning the first Behina of the four Behinat. This Behina is regarded as the closest to the Ma'atzil, more important, purer, and higher, because her Shinui Tzura is not as great as in the three Behinat that follow. Behina Bet, whose Ratzon is greater than Behina Aleph, is regarded as further from the Ma'atzil, more Ave, lower and indeed inferior to the first Behina. Finally, Behina Dalet is the furthest from the Ma'atzil, lower, more Ave, and inferior to all of them.
Let's say, just real sorry, Fred. Let's
Yeah.
just clarify, because this question always comes up. If Behina Bet is the ability to refuse the light, everyone always asks typically why Behina Aleph, who receives the light, is actually a closer state. And the reason for this is because there is a natural connection between Behina Aleph and the source, the Shorsh. There's a natural flow of energy that just works. It's just perfected, and there's not a separation yet that happens in Behina Bet. Behina Bet literally notices that relation of perfected giving and taking, and then stops that relationship in order to analyze it. This doesn't happen in Chokhmah or Behina Aleph. It doesn't. That relationship between Behina Aleph and the Creator, or that state in the Creator, is perfect. Behina Aleph does its job by receiving. It has no problem. Just wants to receive. That's okay. And the Creator just wants to give. And this union is perfected, and there's nothing there. But as soon as we get to Behina Bet, the next state, Behina Bet suddenly notices that state and stops it in order to evaluate, calculate it, and judge it. And so that's why that state is more egoistic, if we can say, than the state prior to it. And that's why those two states are in the order they are. I just want to add that.
So that is why the Rav writes that the Kav Nimsha, from above downward, meaning from the first Behina to the fourth, and not all the way, which is the lowest. The above matter of above and below was renewed with the emergence of the Kav. Before the Kav illuminated, meaning during the Tzimtzum, there was no up or down there. However, after she received the Or merely as a Kav, meaning not in all four Behinat, but only in her first three Behinat, Behina Dalet remained dark, without Or. Only now did it become known that Behina Dalet is low, Ave, and inferior, and that the three preceding Behinat are erected on top of her, according to their purity in proximity to the Ma'atzil. However, during the Tzimtzum, when the Or left all four Behina at once, that discernment among the degrees had not yet occurred. Okay, we're good. Item 2. The upper Rosh of the Kav extended from Ein Sof himself and touched it, although the siyum of that Kav, downward to its end, does not touch or Ein Sof. Meaning 5, meaning the first Behina of the four Behinat. So Kav is meaning the first Behina of the four Behinat. 6, touched it, Behina Aleph.
Wait, sorry. It's not the Kav, it's the Rosh of a Kav. That's what they mean, the meaning of the first Berina of the four Berina.
Right.
That's not the Kav per itself, but really the Rosh of a Kav, the starting point of a Kav. The Kav goes all the way down to Berina Dalet. So that's what we have to understand. That's what we're reading. That's what we're reading before. But the Kav goes all the way down, in all the four Berinot. And Berina Dalet remains dark because it doesn't have a light yet. And that's why it's going to be able, we were reading before, that halal vacuum that can be the pulling of a light because it is lacking it, as we were speaking about the yearning. Just wanted to make the specification here, that's all.
Oh, okay. So item 6, the Ein Sof himself and touched it is talking of Behina Aleph, meaning the upper Rosh, is the closest to Ein Sof, meaning to the Ma'atzil. For that reason, she is regarded as touching him, because of the Shinui Tzura in Behina Aleph is not apparent enough to separate it from the Ma'atzil. Down at its end, 7, implies Behina Dalet, the furthest and lowest of them all. She does not receive the Or Elyon and is therefore regarded as not touching Or Ein Sof and is separated from it.
So this is why Behina,
Yep.
I'm sorry, this is why Behina Dalet, I was just going to say, has the strongest desire, because there's a sensation of complete separation. So that longing is very strong. So as the Behina, as the states of the vessel grow, as they get seemingly further away or separated, as they become a unique thing outside of the creator, the longing becomes stronger, that desire for it becomes stronger. So as it's falling away, like a rubber band being pulled, the desire to come back is stronger. So those are kinds of how the states, how you could look at the states with the Behinot.
Absolutely. What I was gonna type out here, the Behina Dalet is what actually creates that full separation and the uniqueness of the existence. It's not a real and true separation in the sense of the fact that the vessel's always in the infinite light, but it's separation in the way that it functions and in its perception of that light.
It's the final state that it actually says, I'm now a separate, I now see a full separation between me and it. I now can perceive how different we are, and because of that, I have a longing to return to the states I had prior. So that final state is the state that it says, okay, now here I am and here it is, and there's a degree between us that creates a tremendous longing within me. That's the final state.
Perfect. Item 3, Or Ein Sof extended and expanded down through that Kav. All the Olamat are in the place of that halal that has been restricted. Item 4, he emanated and created and made and formed all the Olamat in that place of that halal. Formed. It implies, or it's emanated, created, made, and formed. 8. It implies the 4 Olamat called Atzlut, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya, which contain all the inner innumerable Olamat. These 4 Olamat extend from the 4 above Behinat, Atzlut from Behina Aleph, Bria from Behina Bet, Yetzira from Behina Gimel, and Asiya from Behina Dalet. I think sometimes in our language, English, the form idea is more of Yetziraic, and the made idea is the manifesting, the Asiya. But it just depends on how you're able to view it. I didn't know if you wanted to say anything about Abia here, Raz, or if you wanted to continue, or Philippe.
As we go forward, we're going to associate all kinds of sensations and terminology within ourselves toward these things. It sort of just develops. It's like an evolutionary process. So right now we're going through the beginning of Talmud Eser Sephirot, which is basically just showing us the fundamental ideas behind the book. And these sections are really telling us the basics for us to base the rest of our work on. And we get into the actual understanding of our world coming up here in a little bit, but we first have to understand not just from our world forward, but what happened prior, or how we came to this place. And once we understand that, it's very easy to return. So learning the the consequence and the cause allows us to make changes in that we can start to utilize the method for re-emerging back to what we long to reveal. And so right now, some of this stuff you're going to look at and say, okay, so much terminology and so much so difficult to grasp on these things. It's okay. Just as we keep going, it'll start to make more sense. It'll just become more alive to you. You'll have more recognition toward it, more of a relationship with it, and it's just natural. So don't fret or struggle over some of this stuff right now. It'll get there for sure. It'll penetrate.
And just as a side note, the terminology, again, some people may disagree with me, but the terminology is quite important because it's like here these different phases, there's 4 phases. And in the 4 mode, each connected to each phase. So it's how to, like we were speaking before, in the prenatal age is where there's the highest desire because it's totally almost no will to bestow, it's full of will to receive. And it is the asiya, the doing. And it's important to compare, and maybe like Raz said, maybe later on we'll be able to feel what it means. But it's important to understand that there is a difference between making, forming, and creating. And for those that are linguistic, then you can really understand the subtlety because each one of them is from nothing. We're making, it is a combination of things that are already done. When we are forming something, we're forming it. And making it, it is really to be able to give it its form. It's like before a tree comes, the wood is the essence, is what it's created, it's what there is. I can form it into a tree. So currently the wood has the form of a tree. When I cut it down and I make from it a table, I use the tool and made it a form and give it its form. So there is some subtlety into the terminology, and this is important to connect with the Berinot, with each Berinot. Our one is totally to receive, and our one is totally to bestow from the other extremes. And that's all.
Everything we relate, there's a way to base our current perceptions on the words and relate to them, and this is good. Philippe's right. It's good to understand what's being said, but as we graduate through this text, those connections and relationships are going to change drastically, and especially when we get to levels of really understanding the deeper meanings of these things that happen way within us. Our relationships to what Atzilut, Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya mean are going to completely change, but it's good to have something to hang on to now. So if there's any part of this that any kind of terminology or anything that you don't quite understand, at least have some rope to it all, just let us know and we'll try to create that for you. But these things, the whole wisdom of Kabbalah is constantly in motion, and it's transforming and changing as we graduate into different degrees of having a relationship with what's really being said in the text. So expect that to happen. You will graduate into different ideas and concepts as you start to really dig within yourself, and that will help a lot. But in the meanwhile, for now, if you have questions, just speak up and we'll keep going, Frater.
Absolutely. So we have item 5. Prior to these 4 Olamot, the Ein Sof was He is one and His name one, in wondrous and concealed unity. Not even the angles that are closest to Him have the might and the attainment of Ein Sof, for there is not a created mind that can attain Him, for He has no place, no boundary, no name. Olamot 9, called Atzilut, Bria, Yetzirah, Asiya, which contain all the Olamot. Before all that, meaning before the Tzimtzum, these 4 Behina were considered to be one above the other, but as simple unity. The meaning of simple unity is that there is no differentiation of degrees or between Or and Kli, but He is one and His name one. He is one and His name one. 10. He implies the Or Elyon. His name implies the will to receive that is necessarily there. His name is Ratzon, implying the will to receive. Angles closest to Him, 20. This means that now, after the Olamot have been created, Even the angles, which are spiritually the closest creations, do not have the attainment in Ein Sof. No place, no boundary, no name. 30. Since in Ein Sof it is He is one and His name one, and since there is no place and Kli apparent there at all, no mind of a creature can attain Him, for there is no attainment without a Kli.
So this is basically just backing up the fact that the creator had to create this separate, the Kli had to finish every state in order to notice its separation between it and the creator, because there is no attainment. The purpose of creation couldn't happen without the Kli being identified with this final state. And the creator's seeming intention here, because we can only know the creator by its light, is that it wants to give endlessly, right? It's not saying that we understand the creator's intention behind all of this, but it's seemingly that it just bestows. What is it bestowing? It's bestowing life. It's bestowing light. It's bestowing energy. It's just endlessly bestowing it in infinite degrees. We never run out of this thing. So the creator is emanating this perfected substance that we use to exist. In other words, when I breathe, when I think, when my heart moves, it's all given to me from above. Everything that I am constantly taking from this source. I couldn't exist without it. I wouldn't have a conscious awareness. I wouldn't have any of my facilities in my body or any of my emotions or any of my thinking. So the creator is just giving us this endless light. But without us being aware of this relationship, in other words, without me understanding this relationship, I have no way of ever achieving the purpose of creation, which is for me to rise and grow as a separate soul, but adopting the attributes of this light, becoming more similar to it, merging with it and growing into it. So it's not that the creator is doing anything other than just bestowing outward. And the vessel has to determine how it's going to utilize and take and adopt this ongoing light based on all of its attributes, which seemingly are completely in opposition. In other words, I have to breathe. I have to have energy to think. So I have to take from the all. But I'm not really necessarily happy with this relationship. I don't want to just be some thing that exists because the all influences me and completely dominates me by giving me everything. I want to learn how to be like the all. Therefore, how do I bestow? What can I do? How can I grow? How do I evolve? What's my game here? What's the purpose here? So Kabbalah is teaching us how to expand ourselves beyond this simple taking, the simple existence. It's teaching us how to penetrate into, back up through, and generate myself back into the revelation of the spiritual world. That's the whole purpose of it. It's not about, we talked yesterday, it's not about becoming a morally good person or loving people better. These are all obligations of ours. We should be loving, we should be patient, we should be kind. These are things we should be, but these are all ethics. Kabbalah speaks only within myself on how I can reveal that which has been concealed. And right now, the Creator's light is concealed. I know I breathe it. I know I use it to think. I know I use it to feel. All of these things I using the Creator's light, but I have no relationship with it beyond this. It's concealed from me entirely. So Kabbalah specifically talks about making a revelation spiritually. How to reveal that which has been concealed. That is all. That's it. So this is the journey now. So we're understanding the purpose, how the Kli was built, how the Kli fell away, why the Kli fell away, the ability, the attribute of the Kli, which is the desire, and this process, which is good. It's the fundamental basis of what we're learning. The next stages here, we're going to learn about how these upper worlds are created, and it's a vital part of the learning. What are the worlds? How are they created? How do they intermingle? And how do the parts of Fim work within each other and all of these things? Because if I understand that, the creation and structure, then it's very easy for me to utilize that ladder for climbing back. And that's what we get into, I think, in the the next, especially into section 2, but we'll go into it a little bit more further. So we keep reading, Philippe? Are we done or what?
So if you want to expand on what we read so far, or if we can finish another item, it's fine with me. I just was looking at some of, because he speak about like when he's telling me that his name and his ratzon, in parentheses with in gematria, which means their value are the same. I was trying to calculate because Hashem will be his name will be 245, but it does not really. And Res and Ratson will be Ret Sadik Vav Nun, which will be able to give the same numerology, but I don't get to the same numerology, because that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think that we could go into it, but I think that the problem is that when you read through TES, when you're starting Kabbalah, this is not necessarily the best text to begin with, because it's a very complicated text. It talks about very high-level spiritual ideas and concepts that have to be grounded in a basic fundamental understanding. But it's good to walk through this way when you have people that can share with each other, because it helps the group kind of grasp onto what's happening. Typically, when they read TES, they just read it, and there's not a lot of discussion, because it's for each person to try to penetrate. But what we're doing is just kind of giving nudging and just kind of translate, like Philippe is helping so much with us translations and understanding some of the terms. And this is all good in building that fundamental idea. But the elements or the sacred name and how they relate to the worlds and how we're trying to reveal the full name and all of these ideas, it's going to come up a lot later on as we read forward. As for the rest of 1 and 2, I mean, we could go on talking about this probably for years, right? But at some point we have to keep moving. So can either go into the next section and read a little bit, or we can just stop now and start another time. It's up to you guys.
Yeah, just wanted to what I was talking just a few minutes ago about the gematria of his name will be Shem. Shin is 300, and Mem is 40, which will be 340. And Ratson, it will be Res, Sadik, Nun, which is Res is 200, Sadik is 90, 290, plus Nun, which is 50, will be 340. So that's what he was trying to say here into the value of the gematria between his name and number 10, between his name and the Ratson, and playing the will to receive. So that's why when we were speaking about why his name is in E, it was the Ein Sof and the Aurelion, and his name is relation to the will to receive. So many, and the Rav is giving me a hint that where I can find that into the value, the numerological value of both terminology. And if you want to go to the next one, please be my guest. Or if you want to just stop here, it's also fine.
Okay, so this is Histaklupanami, or inner reflection. First, you must know that when dealing with spiritual matters that have no concern with time, space, and motion, and moreover when dealing with godliness, we do not have the words by which to express and contemplate. Our entire vocabulary is taken from sensations of imaginary senses. Thus, how can they assist us where sense and imagination do not reign? For example, if you take the subtlest of words, namely oro, lights, it nonetheless resembles and borrows from the light of the sun, or an emotional light of satisfaction. Thus, how can they be used to express godly matters? They would certainly fail to provide the reader with anything true. It is even truer in a place where these words should disclose the negotiations in the wisdom in print, as is done in any research of wisdom. If we fail with even a single inadequate word, the reader will be instantly disoriented and will not find his hands and legs in this entire matter. For that reason, the sages of the Kabbalah have chosen a special language which we call the language of the branches. There is not an essence or a conduct in this world that does not begin in its shoresh in the upper world. Moreover, the beginning of every being in this world starts from the upper world and then hangs down to this world. Thus, the sages have found an adequate language without trouble by which they could convey their attainments to each other by word of mouth and in writing from generation to generation. They have taken the names of the branches in this world, where each name is self-explanatory, as though pointing to its upper shoresh in the system of the upper worlds. That should appease your mind regarding the perplexing expressions we often find in books of Kabbalah, and some that are even foreign to the human spirit. It is because once they have chosen this language to express themselves, namely the language of the branches, they could no longer leave a branch unused because of its inferior degree. They could not avoid it avoid using it to express the desired concept when our world suggests no other branch to be taken in its place. Just as two hares do not feed off the same foramen, we do not have two branches that relate to the same shoresh. It is also impossible to exterminate the object in the wisdom that is related to that inferior expression. Such a loss would inflict impairment and confusion in the entire realm of the wisdom, since there is not another wisdom in the world where matters are so intermingled through cause and consequence. In the wisdom of Kabbalah, matters are connected and tied from top to bottom like a single long chain. Thus, there is no freedom of will here to switch and replace the bad names with better ones. We must always provide the exact branch that points to its upper shoresh, and elaborate on it until the accurate definition is provided for the scrutinizing reader. Indeed, those whose eyes have not been opened to the lights of heaven, and have not acquired the proficiency in the connections of the branches of this world with their roots in the upper worlds, are like the blind scraping the walls. They will not understand the true meaning of even a single word, for each word is a branch that relates to its shoresh. Only if they receive an interpretation from a genuine sage who makes himself available to explain it in the spoken language, which is necessarily like translating from one language to another, meaning from the language of the branches to the spoken language. Only then will he be able to explain the spiritual term as it is. This is what I have troubled to do in this interpretation, to explain the Eser Sephirot, as the godly sage the Ari had instructed us, in their spiritual purity, devoid of any tangible terms. Thus, any novice may approach the wisdom without failing to, in any materialization, a mistake. With the understanding of the Eser Sephirot, one will also come to examine and know how to comprehend the other issues in this wisdom. So that was a very,
Yeah, we should stop here. And we should also next time maybe go back to that because there is a lot. I don't know if everyone is understanding what we're speaking about here.
disclaimer.
That's, yeah, it's a disclaimer too, yeah. But it's also an explanation of how we're going to have to seek the understanding of what we're reading. How do we going to have to relate each what terminology that we're learning into the branches, into that what we're sensing here, into the kli, and how it is connected to its roots. Like we said before, there is nothing in above, there is nothing in below that is not in above. So, but I think anyone else want to add things or questions, then soon I will have to disconnect the call and get going. Thank you.
Okay, before we get into questions, this is, like Philippe said, this is very important to understand. The spiritual texts that we look at are written in a specific manner that relates to the inner sensations and the spiritual ideas and concepts that come down from that root into the branch of this world. But there's no way to define those things where language doesn't exist. So they've associated those things to worldly descriptions, specific worldly language that allows the sages to communicate between themselves. So when we look at the books like the Torah or some of the Kabbalistic books, there is a specific underlying language being used that's talking about very high spiritual matters. That's talking about the relationship between the root and branch on a spiritual plane. And it's being brought down into this world and being used in a language that can be understood between the Kabbalists. So and there's a couple of these kinds of languages. In this particular work here, unlike we see in the Zohar, or we call like the language of legends or the language of branches, we see the language, it's sort of understood as the language of Sephirot, meaning specifically talking about the interaction of the vessel and the lights. The Partsufim, the Sephirot, and the pathways and the understanding of how all these things connect to each other by specifically using the names of the parts and the names of the Sephirot within them and the commingling of these things. So this is different. It's a higher kind of language, a more direct kind of language, but doesn't take away from the kind of language you see in the spiritual books that seem to be legends, or talk about analogies of things, or speak about historical events, or all of these kinds of ideas. is not taking away that that language is inferior in any way. It's just a different way of saying it. That's all. So they specifically had to use a coded language to speak to each other, because there's no way to wrap this around any other way than using this. Plus, it allows the sages to speak to each other in a way that they can directly relate. You can, like the Rav says here, you cannot make one thing another thing when you're dealing with the language of branches. It has to be both coincide with each other. So one sage could know the attainment of another sage based on his use of this language, because he could properly identify that spiritual attainment through what he was discussing in this language of branch. So, and there's a lot to be said here. So we can't go into it. We have to go, but this is an important point, and we should, Philippe, you're right, go back over this when we start again.
Anyone else has any other questions? I have to make it so understandable. It's not only like a different language, it's almost like a chemistry, like a learning equation, because there is a lot within a chemical statement, like S2O, O2, or C2, or whatever chemical formula that we have. It tells me a lot about all the elements that extend from that formula. So that's why, like Ross said, it is not that easy sometimes to understand, especially TES. And if we don't have anything else, I will then disconnect the call. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. And hopefully this will be soon on a video. Right now, I'm still working on lesson 4. So we'll have lesson 4, lesson 5, and another one. So, and Samaki, as we did last time. So thank you very much.